Good morning, everyone, or good evening, or wherever you might be in some part of the world. Listen, I love this. Listen, I got so much excitement about this one, I can hardly even sort of contain myself, which I realize feels a little bit of an infomercial for growth debates. But listen, welcome to the first great marketing growth debate as hosted by the MMA and our marketing sciences partner, Newstar. If you don't know me, I'm Greg Stewart, CEO of the MMA. And if you don't know the MMA, we're a nonprofit trade association here for the greater good of marketing. I often like to joke that fundamentally our mission is to save marketing from marketers at some level. And so I think these debates kind of get to the heart of that. And so again, we just had a call with the panelists, and Pete, who I'm going to bring on here, Dr. Pete Fader, pretty soon. We were just talking about how great we think this event is. I realize it's a little self-serving for our own kind of thing, but it's one of those events where, every time we talk to somebody, said, hey, we've got this idea, what do you think? Everybody just really wrapped their minds around it. So with that, but then again, let me just sort of introduce the MMA. We are the probably more the modern marketing association today. We represent 800 member companies. We work mostly for marketers, but we also invited ad tech and marketing tech companies to the table. We operate in 15 countries around the world. So if you don't know us, please feel free to either reach out to me, Greg, at MMA Global, or any member of the team, or connect with us in any way. We're happy to tell you more about that. It's funny, when we first went to the board about this, they kind of warned me a little bit. It was funny. Some people who really knew a lot of the growth frameworks that you're going to see the kickoff today, again, by Dr. Pete Fader, they said, do you realize, Greg, by going down this path, you might be kicking off a bit of a religious war against some of these sort of platforms and thinkings and frameworks and discussions. And so, never one to sort of back down from any kind of challenge. We said, oh my God, all the more reason we need to do this and get this word out for marketers. Because at the fundamental basis of it, do we all really understand this? Are we caught up with the latest insight and perspective about how we really strategically produce growth? It's not, as much as we all love the sort of brand ads and communications and, and particularly, dare I say, even TV, honestly, is that really what it takes to build a business today, to produce the highest level of growth and to build the business in the right way? In part, what you're going to hear from Pete today and so on. So with that, just to make sure you're all kind of aware of the process here, there are a total of 4 currently scheduled. So there's little illusion, there might be more coming over the next 3 to 4 months. Many of you have already signed up for those other ones. We'll keep you posted on that. We have those timings already set. Obviously, today is first with Dr. Pete Fader from Wharton. Couldn't be more excited to have him, followed by Mike Hansen from UCLA, then Byron Sharp from, what's his book? Marco, I forgot his book already, and I can't read the slide here because it's just too small. Let me see. Oh, How Brands Grow. I knew that. And then Joe Rubinson, who's the former chief research officer of the ARF, who's done a lot of work around marketing frameworks. And so, again, if you don't have yourself scheduled for that, please do join us. If you do need to sort of understand the screen, I think it's pretty self-evident. We think it's a pretty good sort of platform here. Love to have your feedback, though, if there's any questions or issues you want to raise around how we maybe better make use of this new webinar platform for the MMA. You've got a menu bar at the bottom there that kind of gives you a series of options. So you either find linkages to, in this case, Pete's book, or to the bios of any of the speakers, or anything else around this. Please feel free. You can change the size of those windows. You can move things around if you haven't really played with that already. So hopefully that sort of is some intuitive sense. But again, if you think there's a way that we can set this up better for you, we're going to do that. Listen, I also want to just take a quick shout out, though, and give a special thanks to the MMA team. This is truly, it took a village to pull us all off, to get a new web platform, to get this many industry luminaries together in the right place, and to get this event communicated to all of you. So again, thank you to all the MMA team and Pete and everybody else, and Mark and Jenna, who I'll introduce here in a moment, for joining us. I don't think I have anything else that I really need to share with you. The first session here is you're going to hear from Pete Fader. He'll take you through, 25, 30 some odd minutes of his theories around customer centricity. Pete is from Wharton. He mentioned to me early here that they have been doing this He's been working on his theories now for 30 plus years. And so, you're hearing an evolution of this. I've seen a number of his previous talks at Wharton and then also just sort of online here. And it's interesting how this sort of his thinking has really evolved to, I think, the perfectionist today. As he said, kind of, we got on, he says, yeah, he goes, I've been working on this forever. And suddenly everybody woke up and realized that I was probably right in a lot of cases. Then you're also going to hear, too, Joanna O'Connell is going to come on when Pete finishes and ask some interview questions. And then we've asked Mark Vermute from Newstar to kind of share with us the Q&A session, kind of walk through that. Again, Newstar is playing a role of marketing sciences advisor on this to make sure we get this right. Because it's not just enough to have the theories, but at some point you got to go measure and execute against all of this. Again, I talked a little bit about the platform. We love Q&A questions. Mark will take that over. So we encourage you to please submit anything along the way there. We'll collect those, and Mark will pick the best or collate questions in a way that was sort of effective. We will stop on time. And with that, it is with great excitement and anticipation that I introduce you officially to Dr. Peter Fader from Wharton School, University of Pennsylvania, and to hear his framework and theories broadly under the concept of customer centricity. So with that, Pete, I turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Greg. And thanks to everyone for taking the time both to help make this happen and to participate in it. I got to tell you, I am so excited about it. I've been talking to Greg and other folks about this for months. But wouldn't it be great to take a lot of the thought leaders and just bring them all together and have them put their stuff out there and then let all of you decide what makes sense, what needs further testing, what kinds of theories and methods should be further developed and so on. So I got to warn you, Greg mentioned something about religious fervor earlier on, and that's going to be a big problem for me here. I'm really into this stuff, which really means three things. Number one, I got a ton of content. I am not sure I'm going to be able to get through it. Means I'm going to be rushing a bit. And also, even though I'm an academic and my goal is to find the truth, I'm going to take a bit more of an advocacy position here. I'm going to sell my stuff a little bit more than I ordinarily would if I'm just writing a paper for an academic journal. So with those caveats, let me jump right in over here and let me set the stage. That for me, I think that the key to long-term growth is leveraging customer lifetime value. Now, there's a bunch of you out there who are saying, yeah, I get that all the way with CLV. There's others who are going, huh? CL what? So let me set the stage for it. In fact, I think this next slide here sets the stage for the entire growth debate, okay? So this isn't just a way to set up my own stuff, but if you think about it, if you boil it all down to the way every company, product or service, B2B, B2C, domestic, international, big or small, has pursued growth, it's through one of two approaches. And there's a lot of other experts who have kind of put similar frameworks out there, and I'll refer to some of them. So there'll be some companies that just say, we're the best. You want the best, you're going to buy from us. We're going to produce the best products. We're going to deliver them in the best possible way. We're the best, best, best. And it's all about this idea of quality, differentiation, these perceptions of expertise. And so, and you can think, pick a product category, and you can find some company, whether it is the best or not, that will be positioning itself in that way. And then there'll be others. And again, it's not just the companies I'm talking about. It's also the growth frameworks that say, the stuff we sell, it's as good as anybody else. It's fine. But we're going to get it out there really, really, really broadly. Okay, so we're going to really focus on scale. We're going to shout real loud. We're going to push through every point of distribution that we can. We're going to really think about minimizing that friction to get people to buy our stuff. So we're as good as anybody else. It's just that our stuff is always at arm's length. And so you're going to think about us first, and therefore you're going to buy us more often, even if we're not necessarily meeting needs any better than some potentially higher quality thing. So pretty much every growth framework out there is focusing on one or the other of these things. And here's my contention. That was fine for most of the last century, but times are changing. For the reasons that you see towards the bottom of this slide, and that many of you are living day in, day out. It's not enough just to invent a good thing. It's not enough just to shout louder than anybody else anymore. Those approaches have really leveled off. They've commoditized. There's, for a variety of reasons that you see down below here, it's really hard to break out of the pack. You see so many companies that continue to push these approaches further. Let's come up with design thinking or blue ocean strategies to come up with that breakthrough idea. Let's think about, Six Sigma or lean this or that in order to kind of scale things out. So we just try to let's innovate faster and let's cut costs further. And my contention is we need an entirely different strategy. It's not enough just to try to break through on one or the other dimensions here. Now, this idea of adding this more customer-oriented dimension isn't entirely new, and some of you might be familiar with some frameworks like those of Tracy and Weersma, who had a book out there, The Discipline of Market Leaders, back in 1995, saying either we're going to be product leader, we're going to focus on operational efficiency, or they put out this idea of we could do it through the customers. So it's not a radical idea, but the way that people have expressed it, the way that people have recommended doing it hasn't been very good, in my humble opinion. And a lot of it was, you just got to get the customers to love you, and you have to love the customers in exchange. And, a lot of people who see my work on customer centricity think, oh, yes, 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 yes. We are centered around every single one of our customers. We can't sleep at night until every customer is satisfied. And I say, no, okay, that's not it either. In fact, that might be even worse in a lot of ways. And as I point out over here, you can't love all of your customers. It sounds nice, and maybe you're going to tell that to your customers, but let's face facts. You can't do that. It doesn't scale. And so many companies out there are saying, we're going to find ways to turn those ugly ducklings into beautiful swans. We're going to bond with them. We're going to educate them. We're going to give them all the products and services that they need. We're going to anticipate what is the next thing they need from us, and we're going to give. No, you can't do all that. And so it's really hard just to have this generic blah, blah, love your customers sort of thing. It's downright absurd. So when I put these words out here about customer centricity, that's not what I'm talking about. It is not the idea of being focused around the customer. It's more a recognition that not all customers are created equal. We got to figure out the differences across them. So again, here's the just the acknowledgement from some of the old books that, yeah, they can have that third dimension, but I want to bring real sharp clarity to what we mean by that third dimension and some heavy-duty research to really support it. So I've done tons of research. I'll share some of the highlights with you in a few minutes. But right here is the heart of it all, that if you really want to achieve success, you're going to do so by finding this select set of customers. If we can figure out who the best customers are and build our business around them, by finding ways to better meet their needs, to deepen our relationship with them, to figure out products and services that we don't even sell, that we can recommend to them to show that we are a genuine, trusted advisor. Okay, and to really have them stay with us, spend more, and find more customers like them, that we can make more money in a sustainable, defendable, ethical way than just focusing on the product and just putting it out there to faceless, nameless customers, or just kind of mindless scaling and just hoping that if we build it big, that they will come. It's a very different kind of strategy, and in many ways it's at odds with some of those traditional strategies, which makes it difficult. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. So I've been writing these books on customer centricity. The first one focuses mostly on what are we talking about here? How does it distinguish from these more product-oriented approaches? And by the way, if you're interested in it, and I hope some of you are, brand new version of the first book just came out. The one with the circle that you see down the bottom there just came out like last week. So if you're going to Amazon to buy it, make sure you get this one, not the older one, because they have all kinds of new ideas. And then a second book, more on implementation. So how do we actually do this stuff? How do we develop a winning strategy based on customer lifetime value? Okay, end of ads. At the heart of all this is the idea of that select set of customers. How do we do that? How do we have the insight? How do we have the chutzpah in order to say, these customers over here, yeah, they're the special ones. Those over there, they can wait. How do we do that? How do we do that in a way where it's objective, where we're kind of correct in doing so, and where we can actually build the business around it? And that's where we get to this idea of customer lifetime value. If we can go to each and every customer at a granular level and predict how long will they consider making purchases with us? How long will the relationship last? How many purchases will they make over that horizon? How much will they buy? How much will they spend when they do? If we can project each of those three behaviors, and we can, and bring it all together, that's going to give us the sense of overall projected future profitability for each and every customer. And once we have that magic wand, that changes everything. Now, before I go on, I do want to acknowledge that CLV might be based on more than just spend. It's really important to point this out. There's so many industries. I'm pointing to pharmaceuticals as just one example over here, where sometimes it's more than just how much stuff you're buying and how much you're spending. So in the case of pharmaceuticals, healthcare, financial services, we might want to take into account other aspects like, how much have we enhanced your life, and are you taking your medicine or not? So sometimes it's more than just dollars and cents. But having said that, honestly, it starts with dollars and cents. So I've done lots and lots of research on it. Here's just a small sample of the many papers that I've done. Top journals, award-winning, very accessible to managers as well, to basically develop these methods. And just to kind of show off just a little bit, I mean, there's a slide I literally created just for this talk over here. These models work incredibly well. Such an amazing array of applications. And again, I don't care if we're talking about B2B or B2C. I don't care if we're talking about some big, complicated technology product, some enterprise SaaS solution, or kind of a new type of chewing gum. The basic patterns of customer behavior are remarkably similar, remarkably robust. And so we run these models over and over and over, and we'll do them over long time horizons and with different kinds of data inputs and with different kinds of managerial objectives arising from them. And I hope you're kind of taking my word for it right now. I hope that some of you are tempted to say, let me dig in and find out some more. I'll give you a little bit of a couple of highlights on the next 4 slides over here. So just as a couple of examples, this would be a very typical plot. When we look at a single cohort of customers, we watch a group of customers who we acquired at a particular point in time, and we just watch them over time. And in your first glimpse of this, you can see some of the wiggles and jiggles due to seasonality and promotions and things like that we can pick up, but are not the heart of a long-term growth strategy. The heart of the long-term growth strategy is to make sure that we have the right kinds of customers. And yeah, we'll use the promotions and all that sort of thing to maybe enhance some of that value, but it's not going to make those customers great. But one of the things I want to emphasize over here, and I want you to appreciate both how long this data set is. I mean, it's years and years and years, even the holdout period. Now, as we ran the model up until October of 2015, and then had 3 years of holdout data to say, is the model continuing to work well? And the answer is, yes, it is. And you could see how well the model tracks and projects the customer behavior. But when you look really carefully, look at the top line of the blue box over here. You notice that you start to really see that decline in the overall purchasing of the cohort. This is really important, that a lot of the models that you're going to hear from some of the other thought leaders will basically say that, the customers are either the same, or even if they're different, that here's their inherent behavior. But it really does change over time. And those impacts are very dramatic, okay, if over a long horizon like this. If we're talking about long-term growth, we really care about it. It's not just who are the best customers today, but who are going to be the best customers 3, 5, 10 years from now. And so it's really important to capture some of those differences over time. And here's an even bigger one. Really important to capture the differences across customers. Let me explain what's going on over here. So here's, again, a really long data set, an 11-year data set, where we're saying how many interactions, how many transactions did you make with us over the first 6 years? We're going to build our model, same model, and we're going to predict how many you're going to make over the next 5 years. And you notice this curve over here, and you notice that it's anything but linear. And this is really, really important. And this is why we talk about that select set of customers, because those customers who have done a lot with us are disproportionately more valuable than the folks who have done it 1 or 2 times. A lot of the folks who will focus on scale, let's just grow the penetration of the business, let's just sell it to as many people as possible, are working with a model that implicitly or explicitly says that this future value increases linearly. and that a person who's bought from you 6 times is 6 times more valuable than someone who's bought from you 1 time. That's not true. That's never true. And so it's really important to recognize these differences across customers and to really pivot so much of your day-to-day operations and your acquisition efforts to say, what's up with those customers on the right? Really important to find customers like them. A couple of years ago, I took a lot of these models and commercialized them. Co-founded a company called Zodiac, and we worked with lots and lots and lots of firms. We've run these models in commercial settings thousands of times now, working with retailers and pharmaceuticals and travel and hospitality and gaming and telecommunications, lots of B2B. You name it, we work with them. And we would do what I mentioned before. Let's project customer lifetime value. When you look at this circle over here, I don't even know what company this is from, you get this very typical pattern that most of our customers aren't really worth that much. Again, part of that is that declining pattern, they drop out. But then there's this group on the right, these customers who are amazing, and they're going to stay with us forever, they're going to buy, and they're going to buy a lot, and they're not bargain hunting, they're happy to buy stuff, they appreciate the service that we're providing. That's where your eyes are going when we show you a picture like this. And again, it always looks like this. Now, how high that bar is, how far out it is, yeah, sure, that's going to vary from one company to another. But the idea that most customers are but some customers are awesome, that's exactly, let's forget about the title of my first book, Customer Centricity, Law. Well, let's look at the subtitle over here. Focus on the right customers for strategic advantage. If we can understand what's up with them, what else we can do with and for them, and what makes them different when it comes to acquisition, that's where the money is. If you're not familiar with the Zodiac story, 2 years ago, we sold it to Nike. It was a wonderful outcome in so many ways. And not only was it just a nice financial outcome, but what an incredible validation as well. Here's a company coming to this from a position of power, a company that's doing extremely well, not desperation, and saying we could be doing even better by being able to project, understand, and leverage the lifetime value of our customers. So that was again, a great outcome, because all of a sudden, a lot of other people, companies, academics said, wait a minute, maybe there's really something there. And so I think it's really important to recognize that these models really do work. This isn't just a theory, as Greg was saying earlier. Lots and lots and lots of validation of it. One point I do want to raise before I go on is, what about all those other customers? What about those customers on the left? There's a lot I can say about it. In the interest of time, I'm not going to get in too deep. But it's really important to recognize that even though each one of them isn't that valuable by themselves, collectively, there's so many of them that we still have to be careful about managing their value and our relationship with them. Not to necessarily say that we're going to give them the same 1-800 number in order for them to get through to us. Not to necessarily say that we're going to develop products and services just for them. To say, you know what, they can wait. But still, by having this customer-centric perspective and thinking a little bit about this paradox of customer centricity, you can read it for yourself over here. The idea that, while we're not going to necessarily treat them like royalty, that we're going to recognize the differences across our customers, that collectively we need those so-so customers in order to keep the lights on, in order to make payroll. So in other words, we're counting on those so-so customers just to kind of keep the business running. But we're looking to the valuable customers as our growth engine. I'll say it again. If we can find ways to kind of deepen the relationship with them, find more like them, that's going to give us an opportunity for growth that we're not going to get if we simply say, hey, let's just get a bunch more, average so-so customers. That's the distinction over there. Again, I'm oversimplifying it a bit because I really want you to get the core of the idea over here. And I'm maybe making it sound a bit simpler than it really is. And it turns out it actually is pretty tricky. And I'll be the first to admit that I'm the guy waving the CLV wand. And for years, I was under the belief that if I can give it to you, and if you can just calculate customer lifetime value, that money will come raining down from the sky. And as we've seen in a lot of these commercial engagements, it's not that easy. And so much of it depends on organizational structure, corporate culture, getting buy-in from external stakeholders. So I acknowledge that very strongly. In fact, there's some other nice books about that. A wonderful book by Jay Galbraith called Designing the Customer-Centric Organization. You can look this over yourself. I know it's hard to see. Send me an email. I'm happy to send you this and all the slides. Very, very happy to share them. I'm sure the MMA will do so as well. If you look at the column in the middle here, that describes a typical company. So we're obsessed about the products that we sell and getting them out there. We obsess over market share. And well, you can read that for yourself. You're looking in the mirror, people. That's the way most companies operate. When you look over on the right to see what are the characteristics of a customer-centric organization, one that recognizes the difference, one that recognizes that it's all about lifetime value and satisfaction and retention. And the mindset isn't, hey, we got this product. Who else do we sell it to? The mindset is, hey, we got these amazing customers. What else can we be doing with and for them? It's very difficult to get there. But I've learned in recent years some really interesting ways to make it happen, a really surprising way to get the conversation going. Because look, I'm a marketing professor. And for years and years, I've been going to firms and trying to work my way up through marketing. And if I can win over the CMO, amazing things will happen. Well, you know what? With all due respect to CMOs, I'm not going to declare victory until I can get all of the C-level people on board. And quite honestly, as some of you will acknowledge, sometimes, even if you win over the CMO, it's going to be difficult to get the others on board. So one of the things that have been recently is let's start with finance instead. Let's start with this idea of customer-based corporate valuation. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the same exact models, okay? I'm going to project how many customers are going to acquire, how long are they going to stay, how many transactions are they going to make, how much are they going to spend when they do? These are things that usually marketers are focusing on. But if we can get finance people to focus on it too, if we can add all that stuff up and say, wait a minute, that's the overall revenue of the organization. And if we can do a better job of projecting revenue, doing it further out, doing it more accurately, doing it more diagnostically to understand why and how and when a revenue is going to level off, that we can do a better job than folks on Wall Street of overall corporate valuation. This is the nature of my new startup, Theta Equity Partners. And it's kind of interesting to see that here's a marketing professor, along with my co-founder, Dan McCarthy, another marketing professor, and we're revolutionizing finance through customer-based corporate valuation, recognizing that these models are just as useful, maybe more so, to the folks in finance as they are to marketing. And if we can create alignment within the organization, if we can get everybody on the same page using the same models, the same mindset, amazing things can happen. And so this is what we've been doing. You know, for the most part, we're working with private companies, working with private equity firms to help them put a value on that digitally native men's underwear company, or working directly with a lot of corporations to help them see and show the amount of value that are in their customer base that isn't necessarily showing up on the balance sheet, the income statement, or the cash flow statement. For fun, we'll do a lot of work on IPOs. A number of companies, like Lyft in this case, will reveal just right set of metrics. They'll let us do this kind of reverse engineering, running the same exact models that we'd be using for marketing purposes to say, what does their CLV distribution look like? What does their cash flow look like? What's the overall valuation? And how awesome is it when the Financial Times, the Bible of finance, looks to an analysis by a company run by a couple of marketing professors and says, that's the best analysis that we've seen. Got a couple of nice papers in a recent Harvard Business Review. If you're interested, you could see the link below and click on them. Actually, it does a very good job. Both this article by Dan McCarthy and myself talking about how to do the valuation, but this article by Rob Markey, the NPS guy from Bain, talking about why these ideas are so important. And so, again, we're starting to get a broader coverage, broader buy-in with these ideas. And if you're interested, if you look at that link below, not only does it say HBR, it also says FASB. And yes, indeed, that's FASB, the Financial Accounting Standards Board. We're having a conversation with them to start suggesting that some of these kinds of metrics about what our customers are doing and how many we're acquiring, basically to capture and reflect the kinds of behavior that I'm talking about. You know what? All publicly traded companies should be putting these things out there. All investors should be banging on the doors of companies that they're contemplating investments in, saying, you should disclose that, even though companies in many cases would rather not. And maybe the piece de resistance about all this would be something that we just saw very recently. Probably the most famous, the most respected book on corporate valuation by a bunch of folks coming out of McKinsey are now pointing to some of this work, saying, you know what, this kind of bottom-up, customer-oriented valuation, it's real. You should think about it. It's a really nice complement to the usual top-down approach. And it's that work, Pete Fader, Dan McCarthy, that's really leading the way there. So again, I don't want to focus too much on the finance part alone, but let me give you kind of the overall big picture story. Here's a really nice demonstration from a brand new paper by Dan McCarthy. In fact, he just won a big award just 2 weeks ago for putting some of this work out there. And basically, let's develop a trading strategy based on these ideas. Let's do this kind of customer-based corporate valuation for a bunch of companies. And these are analyses that we had done before, including Lyft, a bunch of other companies where we looked at their IPOs, and a bunch of other companies where we've done the analysis, like, for instance, Wayfair, which we're throwing in there because it's our worst-case scenario. So we're looking at 6 companies where we did the analysis years ago, but so we're on record saying basically what we think this company's worth. And let's throw in kind of the company that has been disclosing a lot of this data on a regular basis, but one where our forecasts of what its stock price should be is the worst one. So let's try to do it conservatively. If you're interested, you can find all of these different analyses. Again, they've been posted for years. And without getting into too many of the details, we'll be able to share a link to Dan's own presentation. That if you use these companies and came up with kind of a buy and hold strategy based on what we're saying about these companies, what their value should be, when is the right time to buy them, when is the right time to sell them, you can look at this graph down to the bottom over here, and you can see how much more money you'd make over a pretty long horizon by using this information, the idea that not all customers are created equal, and recognizing those differences not only going to help us operationally, but going to help us financially as well. Let me wrap it up all over here because I want to get into the conversation with Joanna, and I want to get your questions as well. Key takeaways over here. Number one, we got to celebrate heterogeneity. A lot of marketers talk about the customer. When they start thinking about how customers are different from each other, it becomes a nuisance. Ugh. Do we really have to come up with different kinds of messages for different kinds of customers? Or God forbid, do we have to come up with different versions of the product for different kinds of customers? For many companies, for years and years and years, decades, and even for many of them today, this was a nuisance because we'd rather just focus on the product. We'd rather just focus on the brand. We'd rather just get the message out there and have companies buy our stuff. But today, instead of viewing heterogeneity, the difference across customers, as a nuisance, we view it as an opportunity. And by understanding that at a very granular level, by looking at the Zodiac picture that I showed you before and taking advantage of it, we can make more money than just playing it right down the middle towards the average customer. One of the mistakes I made is using these words, customer centricity, to try to frame this stuff up. Because a lot of people hear it and say, yeah, I know what you're talking about. We love all of our customers. We'll do anything for them. We empower our frontline employees to do anything that they want. And most of the time, that's a bad idea because most of those customers are so-so, and you're wasting time, you're wasting money, you're wasting effort on them, and it's not like you're going to turn them into great customers. I mean, that's just the harsh reality of it. So it's important to understand what we're talking about over here. It's important to get the buy-in. Okay, it's really important to make sure that everyone within the organization understands, to make sure that all of your channel partners appreciate what you're doing, and of course, your external stakeholders. We're making all these investments in customer experience and CRM systems and all that. A lot of your external stakeholders are saying, why are you wasting your money on all that marketing crap? But for us to be able to go back to them and say, look at all of this future value that we have created. We have enhanced the valuation of the firm, even if we didn't do so for the current quarter. That's what we're talking about, long-run growth. I hope that you all agree. And finally, I have to admit that this isn't true for everyone. Okay, not every company should be making this the top priority. There's plenty of companies out there that are finding great success doing the product thing. There's plenty of companies that are finding great success by doing the scale thing. And if so, great. Maybe you should be a little bit more mindful of these ideas, but not necessarily give up your traditional position of strength. But a company like Nike adding it on top of their traditional strengths, and plenty of other companies doing it as a new kind of focus. If you are interested, I'd be delighted to keep the conversation going. Again, there's the books, there's links to our CBCB firm. I hope that some of you both find this eye-opening, and I never thought about that before, but I bet there's others of you that said, you know, I kind of did think about this before, but thank you for cementing these ideas and validating them. That's what I got for you right now. Let's talk.
Great.
Joanna.
Pete, that was phenomenal. I don't know if I'm online here. Mark, do you have me? Okay, yeah, I think I'm there. Listen, let me just take a moment and sort of, listen, Pete, first of all, thank you. I can't thank you enough for this. Phenomenal. By the way, I did look up Nike while we were talking because I have a list of companies who were distressed in first quarter, and Nike was up 5% in actual revenue, and they still held $1 billion of profit. So sounds like, you know, it's working. Good job. Hey, gang, listen, when I reached out to an advisory board on this that I think maybe you'll see, have seen on our website, and said, hey, here's a list of people we could ask to moderate this session, Joanna O'Connor's name went right to the very top of the list. So it was great honor that I introduced Joanna O'Connor. I think many of you know her as principal analyst over at Forrester. She's going to interview Pete, and then we're going to come back with some Q&A from all of you. So please, I see a lot of Q&A coming in. Please keep going. So thanks, everyone. Joanna, all yours.
All right. Thank you so very much. And hopefully you guys can see me. At minimum, you can hear me. So as Greg said, I'm a VP Principal Analyst at Forrester Research. We talk a ton about this living in the age of the customer and this notion of customer obsession, which is sort of our flavor of customer centricity. So I was super, super enthusiastic about having this conversation with Pete. And I tend to focus more on advertising. So I want to talk about that if we have time. But before we do, Pete, I'm really interested, as I was listening to you talk, to this question of, do you make best customers or do you find best customers? And
it's such a great question, and such an important one. Yeah, because there's too many companies out there that think that they can turn those ugly ducklings into beautiful swans. So many in I don't know, financial services and others who say, we're just going to acquire as many as we can, and then we're going to educate them. We're going to have them understand why they're the best. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I'm saying it's really difficult, it's really expensive, and it's much more effective to go out there and find the best customers. And you have to be careful about this, because too often it becomes an issue of navel gazing, that we have our what have proven to be the best customers now, so let's double down on them. But it could be that there's even better customers out there. So the idea of kind of doing, you still have to do broad advertising. You still have to be looking for folks who are even better than your best or are the upcoming best. But all the time, it really is an obsession, not just with the customer, but with acquiring the best customers. That's not easy. It's expensive. It's risky. But that is the right way to go.
So then talk a little bit about what makes a best customer. I know you glossed over it because we were short on time, but I'm super curious because we write about this notion at Forrester of devotees, and they have all of these characteristics, including high value. But are there other things that people can look for, like, they have heavy influencers, or they tend to be very, very loud and proud about the brand, or whatever? I mean, what should people be looking for? Or is it literally just go do the CLV calculation and try and project?
It would be so great if there was something systematic about those folks on that right bar that just makes them different. Let's continue to find more customers like them. It's actually much trickier than that. I'm sad to say, but it's true. And I'll be super honest. At Zodiac, we work with a lot of companies. We'd say, okay, here's the best customers. What makes them different? What are their demographics? What are their media habits? What can we say about them? Let's go do some Facebook lookalike and acquire more like them. And it would work really well, except then we would repeat the exercise next quarter, and we'd find out that the profile of the best customers for the new cohort didn't align as well as you'd like with what it did before. So sometimes a lot of these behaviors, a lot of these attitudes, a lot of these demographics will be more transient than you'd like. Now, some of the things that you mentioned, Joanna, tend to be more enduring. I mean, those who will go to bat for you, those who will post on social media on your behalf, those who are more inclined to buy from you without promotions and so on. So those things will tend to bubble up to the top, but it's no guarantee. It's very context specific, and even in a given context, it's going to vary over time more than you'd like it to.
That's interesting. I mean, that is one of the things I think we're trying to think about is if you find a group of devotees, what makes them devotees? What are the kinds of behaviors that they will exhibit? And I think what you're saying is there are some things that are enduring, that you may find sort of transcend moments in time. And there are other things that are maybe that are a little more transient, which of course makes it extra complicated. Thanks a lot, Pete. So can we talk a little bit about this notion of correlation versus causation in this framework? Because as I was thinking, I was sort of thinking, are we saying that we can, continue to make them better as customers over time, and therefore they're spending more, or is it literally just sort of incidental?
Yeah, again, these are so good. If you notice, because I'm not saying much about specifically which tactics to use to find those best customers or to elevate the value of existing ones. I'm in so doing, I'm kind of avoiding that causality kinds of issue. Because look, I'm going to be the first to admit that there's often going to be different kinds of dual causality, that we look at who our best customers are, and that's going to drive our targeting strategies, and then we find others like them. And so we kind of have a chicken and egg thing going on, and I want to try to avoid that as much as possible. So one of the reasons why I take this more agnostic view about who those best customers are, where they come from, how we get them, I want to avoid giving people the sense that if you do X, then Y will happen. And I have to say that for a lot of companies who will look at everyone wants an X causes Y explanation. But because there very, very often is the other way going around, that we're looking to our best customers to come up with those X's, to determine what messaging to use, that can really muddle the causation and makes it much, much harder. So again, I'm not to say I'm waffling with you, but I'm saying it's harder. And so companies really need to run very, very carefully controlled experiments to make sure that they're kind of ruling out different possible sources of causality. And there's a beautiful, beautiful 1-2 punch between careful A/B testing and a lot of these CLV models in order to come up with those answers. But again, the answers will depend from time to time.
Well, it's what's so tough about then is that it defies one's ability to simply say, I've built something stable. You know what I mean? It's sort of like you have to sort of constantly be rethinking and experimenting. There's not an answer.
Yeah, so that's a real paradox, because on one hand, the overall behavior itself is very stable. So in other words, the kinds of graphs that I was showing you about how behavior changed over time, how it varies across people, the nature of the CLVs, when you look at it from that level, it always kind of looks that way. But underneath the waters, there's a lot of stuff going on, a lot of marketing activities, a lot of generational changes and changes in the competitive landscape that are kind of changing the reasons why things are happening. So it's important to anticipate that the patterns that I showed you will continue to hold. Those are the laws of gravity. But the underlying reasons why and what you do to try to sustain or improve upon them, admittedly, you might even say that's kind of an Achilles heel of the work here. That's why we're so reliant on these behavioral models, because we can trust them, even if it's harder to go that next step.
I have so many questions. This is so fun. Okay, so another one. I'm really interested in the DTC phenomenon, which, of course, at Forrester, we also write tons and tons and tons about. And the DTC's seeming obsession with acquisition above all. And now I'm sort of thinking, are they smart in that they know to acquire what becomes the best customer, or are they just, sort of driven by the wrong motivation to get lots and lots of customers? And what does that mean for their long-term stability and health?
Unfortunately, Joanna, it's mostly the latter. It's mostly this obsession with acquisition, because external shareholders are only seeing top-line revenue, and they're seeing it go like this. And they're saying it's going to go like this forever. But the reality is, no, you got to look below the surface, and you got to say, well, are these customers coming back? How often are they spending? How much money are we making on them when they do things? That's where the action is for long-term growth. And that's at the heart of, I referred to the analysis that we did about Wayfair. I mean, that's a classic example of a company that's riding high right now. I think they hit an all-time high in their stock price yesterday for all the wrong reasons, that they're acquiring like crazy, but they're spending way too much to acquire not so good customers. But on the surface, it looks awesome. But to their credit, they put out the disclosures every quarter that lets us reverse engineer and say, wait a minute, these customers aren't very good. Like, there's a real mismatch over here. This is one of the reasons why we're pushing for not only for more companies to disclose, but for investors to look at these metrics and know what to do with them, to say, wait a minute, let's kind of take our foot off the gas on acquisition and focus a little bit more on retention and development. Finding the right balance there has got to be data-driven, and it's got to be a much more accountable activity than what we're seeing with some of those D2Cs.
Do you have any that you think are doing it the right way?
Oh, absolutely. It's really important because we get a lot of attention for some of the companies that we say that they're overvalued because they're putting maybe too much attention on acquisition. But there's a lot of companies out there that are actually doing an amazing job of acquiring the right kinds of customers and focusing on the care and feeding. So if you looked at that set of companies that I showed very quickly, the ones that we've done analyses for, company like Revolve, the online clothing company out of LA, Farfetch, wonderful company. If you want to change sectors, we look at a company like Slack. Everybody is predicting the death of Slack because of Microsoft Teams. Slack is an amazing company, and they built an amazingly powerful customer base. And instead of just looking at the overall numbers of how many users or claimed users, let's look at ongoing repeat purchasing and all the things I've been emphasizing. So when you look at that level, we find another number of companies, different sectors, different kinds of business models that are actually doing great along these lines. And other companies that are doing just amazingly well with putting these disclosures out there and saying, we're just amazingly, we're open about what we're going to put out there because we're so proud of the way that we've been building our customer base. Big shout out to Dan McCarthy. If you look at, he put out some content yesterday about an amazing company whose name is escaping me, that had the most amazing set of disclosures, just basically say, we got nothing to hide.
So maybe in that vein, I have just a couple more minutes with you, and then we're going to hand it over to Mark to ask some audience questions. What does customer centricity mean for a brand's best customers? I know, again, it was one of those things you didn't really have time to talk about, but I'm thinking, do those people know they're best customers? Do you risk losing them? Does it matter?
I think they should know. Not that you want to rub it in their face at all, but you want to make it aspirational. I think a really good analogy here would be credit scores. Back in the old days, you could never find out your credit score. It was a secret score. Ooh. And ironically, there's actually a lot of companies that will use credit scores as a proxy for lifetime value. And I don't think that's a good idea necessarily. But it's out there, and you can see what your score is, and then they'll give you advice on what you could do to improve it. So, if you believe in the models as strongly as I do, if you validate them as much as I and a number of companies have, then we should be putting the scores out there. Maybe not a dollar value, but some kind of maybe, we know what tier you're in. And it's going to be based less on what you've done in the past and more based on what we project you're going to do in the future. And we'll even tell you why you're not in that higher tier and what kinds of behaviors would get you there. So let's make it aspirational. Let's make it specific about kind of where you are and why and where you could go. Again, I don't want to overplay it, and in some sectors there could be some ethical limitations with it, but I do want customers to know where they stand, and I do want companies to be more disciplined about the way that they deal with the kind of high customers on the right versus the so-so customers on the left.
Yeah, so discipline and more transparency. Maybe along those lines, two more questions quickly. One, I write about advertising, and I think that advertising can play an incredibly important role here. Certainly from an acquisition standpoint, that's sort of obvious. But I also think maybe in the way that you talk to these best customers, you need to have the infrastructure in place. I have bad advertising experiences with brands that I really love and actually with whom I spend a lot of money, and I find it really, really annoying. So can you talk for a second just about the role of advertising?
Absolutely. Thank you, John. I'll give you a great example. It would be Electronic Arts, the gaming company, something that we
Yep.
kind of make a big deal about in our second book. You know, instead of just, they don't even have an external agency to do any of the creative for them, which is amazing, a company of that size. They basically look to their customer base, and they're looking at a certain game, and they're saying, what features of that game, what aspects of it, what scenes and weapons or whatever do our high-value customers use disproportionately than the low-value customers? And then let's emphasize those features in our next set of ads. So let's, again, look to lifetime value, differences in lifetime value as guidance to what we should be focusing on. I think it makes so much sense instead of just saying, what's creative, what's broadly appealing. You know, again, let's focus our advertising on those customers and hope that others will say, you know, that's kind of appealing to me and will come on board as well.
So I have one last question, and then I have to hand it over to Mark, but it feels really important to me. I myself was a CMO for a while of an ad tech company, global ad tech company. And one of the things I think we all struggled with was really getting marketers to think in financial terms, to sort of think in the terms of the business and business success. I mean, do you feel like marketers today are sort of trained to think in terms of business success or not? And what do we do about that?
Yeah, so. You know, the issue is that in marketing, we're making up all kinds of metrics about things that we like and that we focus on, some of which, you know, might be relevant. Like, well, let's just think about things like influence and so on. But they're not as obviously linked, not as directly and consistently linked to corporate valuation. So we really want to work it backwards. We want to say, what are the kinds of metrics that we do have some control over, but are directly linked to it? So how many active users do we have? How many purchases do they make? How much are they spending on average? What I've been saying before, that we want to focus on the kinds of metrics that the CFO should care about as well. We want to have the same dashboard as them. We want to be able to go to external stakeholders and say, look at what we're doing over here, and look at the connections. So I think that there's a lot of room for improvement there. We're seeing some steps in the right direction, but I think there's still a long way to go.
I think that's very true. And with that, I've stolen a couple extra minutes, so I'm going to hand it over to Mark, I think, to take some audience questions now.
Thanks, Joanna. Yeah, everybody, just so you know, Mark Vermute here from Newstar is going to handle the Q&A. He's our marketing sciences advisor on this whole project, so we'll turn over to that. Hey, Pete, I do want to comment, though, Mark, again. I remember when the industry a few years ago, the ARF tried to define engagement, which I find to be kind of the more common vernacular. And you know what their definition was? Quality ads and quality entertainment environments. It basically sounded like TV. And I thought, oh my God, you use TV to define engagement? Like it just, I mean, there's just no definition to some of these terms. It drives me absolutely crazy. Mark, here, take some Q&A from the audience.
Great. No, and Joanna, thanks. You actually covered a number of the questions that came in from the audience, but I think the top question that Pete was expecting to hear, and I didn't just write it for backup, it's come in through three of the questions, is you think about, and I'm going to paraphrase, but if you think about the spectrum of where you focus from a marketing strategy perspective, you are very solidly in the define the customers, target to specific customers, and segment and focus on how you approach them. If we think about Byron Sharp's philosophy of penetration and growth and reach and frequency, it seems to be an opposed position. So are you opposed? Is there reconciliation? How do you balance what he saw in his data set versus what you see in your data set?
Great question, Mark, and to those who asked it. There's actually a remarkable alignment, and I'm not just saying this in a wishy-washy way, but the models that I build are the same models that Byron and the folks at the Ehrenberg Bass Institute build, with an extra layer on top of them in order to account for the differences within customer over time. So I agree with 80% of what Byron says. You know, and of course, you'll hear about it from him in a future webinar. Things like double jeopardy, the duplication of purchase law, the idea that you really do want to advertise broadly. I believe in every one of those things, but here's the difference. Byron will tend to undervalue those most valuable customers. Remember that slide where I showed the convex line versus the flat line? He's going to grossly undervalue those best customers. But I still agree that we still want to get the word out there very, very broadly, as I said to Joanna earlier, because we want to continue to find best customers and maybe find customers who are even better. So the idea of not just talking, not doing the navel gazing and focusing just to the ones you're comfortable with, but to take a big portion of your budget, not all of it, to kind of get the word out there broadly in order to find those best ones, but taking a little bit more of the money than Byron might suggest to kind of double down on those really, really good customers. There is great alignment there, and Byron probably has no stronger advocate in North America than myself.
Well, so then the follow-on becomes, and this came in from a few different people as well, people have talked about the customer and segmentation audience for a long time, and we've talked about that previously. So what's the challenge in organizations from actually making this shift to refocus how you make those allocation and investment decisions? Is it data? Is it maturity of the company? Is it culture?
It is culture and organization design. If we go back to that eye chart that I showed from Jay Galbraith's book, look, segmentation, targeting, positioning, that's eternal. But the difference is this. The way it works for most companies is we come up with the product, we then do some kind of demographic or psychographic segmentation, and we say, which of those segments would find this product most appealing? That's not how we roll in customer centricity land. What we do is we first start with customer lifetime value, and we create the segments on CLV, on behavior. And we say, here's our best customers, that green bar on the right. And then we turn to the product and say, what kind of product should we be developing for them? What kinds of messaging should we have for them? So we're starting with the lifetime values, we're starting with the segmentation, and then figuring out how to do the targeting positioning around it, as opposed to the other way around, where we start with the product. It sounds easy, but it's really difficult for companies to do that, to kind of give up on the traditional demographic and psychographic segmentation. Not to say they have to give up on those measures completely, but you want to start with the CLVs, figure out who the most valuable customers are, then maybe look for demographic, psychographic differences. And I'm telling you, you're not going to find that much because there's still going to be heterogeneity among the people in the green spike. It's tricky.
Well, and so then the next question that follows on from that is, how much data do you need to do that analysis? And does the maturity or stage of the company impact when you know this or when you can act on it?
So certainly the maturity of the company, they have to be mature enough to have some CRM systems to be able to tag and track individual customers, to be able to calculate lifetime value, and to be able to act on it. You know, most companies have that. They just haven't really made it a priority. But it's interesting and sadly ironic that sometimes the most interest that I'll see would be from really young, digitally native companies who say, we want to do this. The sad part is they don't have enough data yet. And because, I showed you before that we look for these differences over time. Sometimes it takes a while to really see those differences. That I generally wouldn't want to do this with a company before I have, say, 3 to 4 years of data to really understand those lifetime values and how they vary across the cohorts of customers. So the startups say, let's do it. And I'm saying, okay, cool. Build the infrastructure now. Build the culture. Build the organization now. But you got to wait a couple of years before you can really act on it. Right now, do the Byron Sharp thing. Go out there and acquire as broad and diverse a customer base as possible. And then once you have the maturity to wave that CLV magic wand, then you can start to really figure out who you want to put that excess focus on.
But that's really helpful to understand the flexibility of the approach that you take over time. And so one last question as I look at the clock. The thing that's unspoken that you've been addressing when you talk about investment is that marketing is multiple Ps. Depending on who you talk to, it's up to 6. And most people think of marketing as the paid media that you invest in. And so how does the tactics that you invest in change? There have been a number of questions about loyalty programs because you're saying best buyers. So these are people you have long-term relationships in. So what are you actually investing in terms of the levers you have for these best customers versus supporting the rest of your base?
Mark, it's not a what question, it's a how question. So all of the tactics that we have at our disposal, loyalty programs, referral programs, premium services, strategic account management, all that's the right stuff. But we got to celebrate heterogeneity. And we got to think about who is the loyalty program aimed at. Most companies screw this up. Most companies think it's aimed at the people at the tippy top. But you know what? They don't need the loyalty program. They're going to buy from you anyway. The loyalty program should be aimed at the people in the middle. Those customers who they kind of buy from us with some frequency, but we like them to buy a little bit more. Buy 9, get 1 free. So those tactics are all good when they're applied at the right time to the right kinds of customers. So part of my goal is to get people to kind of do this matchup between the tactics and the types of customers, the value of customers. It's something that we emphasize quite a bit in the blue covered book, to say which customers at what time should be using those tactics. So part of it is to really understand the customers first and then layer the tactics on top. Too many companies do it the other way around. They kind of get the cart before the horse. We got these cool tactics. Let's just go do them and see what happens. Understand customer differences and value first.
Oh my God, Mark, if I could step in, Pete, you couldn't have given a better segue, because I think Joe Rubinson completely disagrees with the point you just made based on research he's done. So exactly, the debate continues. So listen, everyone, Joanna, Mark, Pete, I can't thank you enough. Just wonderful. In fact, by the way, I was getting text messages from CMO board members in the background saying, this is amazing. I got to get the slides. And hey, can you connect me with Pete to go spend a little time to talk more about him? So I don't think it gets any bigger than that, everyone. Hey, just to close this out for everyone on here, Mike Hansen is up next. Dominic Hansen from UCLA, great founder of Market Share, as you know. Byron Sharp is later this fall, also Joe Rubinson. And as I mentioned, there's probably a couple of secret new people coming into this at some point. So that'll be coming. And then we'll follow up this fall into the winter around sort of the actual debates and bring markers together to sort of have their points of view on what we need to do. So listen, if you have a question, there's a survey coming. Got to make sure I say that. So just everybody, please, every feedback possible as we try to create this into great debate, great format for all of you to serve our members and beyond. Do that. If you want to reach out to me personally about any part of this, please feel free. Again, Joanna, Mark, Pete, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Well done.